I will tell you that I am roughly 10 weeks into my post here as general manager, and for roughly the first week, second week, I spent a lot of time talking to you all about how cool it is to be back here at Hidden Valley, which it is. It's a very special place and very personal for me. But the last 8 weeks, I've dug in deep into the history of this club. And I could only go back as far, really financially speaking, without a lot of additional work until 2001. So tonight, I will start off by basically sharing with you what I've been looking at, what I've been digging into, and what I've been trying to discover. And as I do that, I'm going to do it to provide context into where we are here in 2018 and what to expect going forward. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, we are filming this. So just want you to be aware. You're free to say whatever you'd like tonight. I just want to make sure that you're aware that when you do, the rest of your fellow members will get to also hear that comment. So just want to make that clear, okay? But it will take us roughly, the gentleman who's filming it for us, take us about a week to get the file for tonight. He's going to take the PowerPoint and infuse it into the video, slide by slide. So it will be memorialized throughout the presentation, but we will also upload the PowerPoint itself. So there will be several ways for you to dig back into this conversation if you so choose, or direct your fellow members who couldn't come tonight to go look at that. Okay? Questions? Okay, we're good. So before I do get started, one thing I do want to point out is that I will take questions throughout the presentation, especially the beginning part where we dive into the financials. And the reason being is that I don't want to wait till the end and have to go back and open up a can of worms that we can't put all the worms back into the can. So I'd rather just do it in real time as it goes. Okay, so if you have questions, please ask. So, first things first. Who am I and what am I here to tell you? So I told you for the first 2 weeks, and really it's been about the last 10 plus weeks, I, on a daily basis, have had plenty of conversations about my past childhood here in Reno, growing up here at the club, and my dad, right? Mr. Funk was just in here, we were just talking about him. And that's been great. It's been very nostalgic. But what we haven't talked about is why I'm here and why I'm qualified to be here. So I thought I'd point a few things out to you. And what I did was I put the first 2 pages of my professional work experience from the resume that I sent to the board for consideration for me to take this position. And as promised, you can't read it. Right? And I did that intentionally. No, I'm kidding. You'll clearly be able to read it when you get the PowerPoint on the presentation and the website. But I wanted to point out a few things. So for the last 9+ years, I have lived in the South, between Florida and Texas. And during those 2 different stops, I was at 2 different clubs that had 4 golf courses and thousands of members. So this one here on the right, you'll see I was the director of operations for the PGA of America, and I ran their 4-course operation in Florida. Paired with that, I also was tasked with helping them discover what their next steps would be in a redevelopment plan. So I wrote 20 different redevelopment plans for that property. That property was built in the 80s, so not quite as old as Hidden Valley. That property had about $80 million invested into it at that point in time between the 4 golf courses and the operation. And that property, even though owned and operated by the experts in the business of golf, failing miserably. Losing money to the tune of about $1 million to $1.5 million a year. So I got hired to be the senior most golf operations expert for the PGA of America to go in and tell them how to run their business, even though they spend a ton of time and money training golf professionals on how to run golf courses. It's kind of ironic, right? But the problem there was they had a very active membership, largely filled with former golf pros. So for me, I always likened it being the chef at a retirement home for chefs. A completely miserable job, to be perfectly honest with you. Because no matter what I stated as subject matter expert and what they needed to do, I simply didn't understand the property. I didn't understand the membership. I didn't understand the business. And I couldn't be right with respect to my plan. And I spent 3 years developing 20 different plans. I left in 2012 to go to Texas. And from 2012 through 2015, they spent roughly $30 million that they generated rebuilding their property, and it's now successful. It's now ranked across the board. They're making money and they're happy. So that was a success story, and I'm proud of that. Then I went to Texas, and I was hired by KSL Capital. And if you've been in and around golf, you know who KSL Capital is. They're the big bad guys on the block that suck the life out of every asset they buy and then turn around and sell it for 2-3 times more than they. I shouldn't be saying this. This is all recorded, but anyway, it's not secret. Trust me, it's not secret. But the point is that for the last 6 years, I've been running Barton Creek Country Club in Austin, Texas. Barton Creek Country Club is probably, I think I'm biased, obviously I spent 6 years there, one of the, I'd say the 3 or 4 largest clubs in the state of Texas. Everything in Texas is massive. This was no exception. So we had over 2,100 memberships to the club. Those members contributed through dues and discretionary spend roughly $20 million a year to the club. And I got to manage it. Luckily, I didn't have to manage food and beverage, which was a conversation we had when we interviewed here, largely because that property ran a $25 million food and beverage business and actually had experts who were really good at running a $25 million food and beverage business. I was really good at running a $20 million club. So I had help on the food and beverage, but the focus there was to transition the property from one owner to a new owner and to assist that owner with fixing the club. Their issue there was completely opposite of the one in Florida. Instead of losing money, they made too much. And the problem with a private owner owning a club who makes too much money is you can only imagine how dissatisfied the membership was. Felt as if they were not getting the value for their money. And so I too walked into that environment, and it was very turbulent because not only was the club up for sale, but the members were incredibly dissatisfied, incredibly anxious for the new owner to come in and save the day. And guess what? The new owner didn't. Because it was very difficult to convince that new owner who just spent $300 million buying the property that they needed to go spend money right out of the gate to fix the place. Right? So the reason I share that with you is that I am innately qualified to sit here tonight and tell you about your business. The beauty of it, for me, is that I am not responsible for any of the information that you're going to see on the board today. And the beauty of me being able to report that is I'm just reporting the news. I'm giving you my opinions as a subject matter expert, and I will tell you what I have been looking at and what I've been trying to conclude in this discovery process to really best understand what next steps are for this club. So we're going to get into a financial review of the past, okay? And one of the most important things is to understand the definition of insanity, which you all have been living here for a while. And I will show you that through your financial statements, right? But you cannot expect a different result doing it the same way, okay? So I would like to think that maybe I'm the one the board was considering when they took this approach, which was instead of hiring smart people and telling them how you want them to run your club, this time around, I will tell you that, and as the board members here as my witness, we have not spent any time talking about today's presentation. I did not get any direction from the board telling me what to say tonight. This is my presentation. And I wanted to make sure that that was clear because there is no agenda. There is no purpose other than to educate you on why we are where we are today and the importance of understanding these trends to make the right decisions for the future. Does that make sense? Okay. So, I always like this one too. Okay, ground rules. I just disclaimed, I have literally nothing to do with this place from 2001 to 2017. So the next several slides are just a financial review or my opinion of the last 16 years, okay? So the first rule is, what happened? Don't shoot the messenger, okay? I only have 3 rules. So tonight should be easy, okay? Second rule, don't shoot the messenger, okay? And final rule, don't shoot the messenger. Okay? But in all honesty, folks, tonight is a heavy conversation, and it's a needed conversation. And you'll see that the reason we're having it now is because we've run out of the opportunity to not have the conversation anymore. We're done. We've reached that point. And the reason for it is largely we'll start with your dues, okay? So you all are owners of this club. And the most important thing for you, obviously I think you all know this, but I'll reiterate it. The most important thing for your ownership is your income and your revenue drivers, which is your memberships and the dues or the amount of dues that those memberships pay. So over here on the left, you'll see 2001 through 2017. Next to it will be monthly dues, okay? Next to that is the number of proprietary members. And so for those of you who are in the room who've been involved with leadership here, you'll know it's absolutely impossible for this club to have had 444 members. But that number is truly a net number. And I'll tell you in a second how I got there. But you'll just keep going down from left to right. You have dues from your proprietary members, dues from your social, dues from your legacy, social membership fees, summer social membership, et cetera, okay? The reason I laid this out is to show you the ebbs and flows of where your money has been coming in over the last 16 years, primarily from your proprietary dues. They are your primary source of revenue from a dues standpoint. Then you have your social dues and then the newly adopted legacy dues. To be honest with you, right here in 2018, you'll start to see some revenues there in the legacy category. But you also see that over here, membership transfer fees used to be a very viable part of this club from a revenue standpoint. And those revenues were used to obviously pay for the expenses that we use to operate and fulfill your experience here at the club. So, a couple of quick things to point out. Right here, 2006 to 2008, the reason I shaded those was that in 2006 and 7, you'll see you had a $15 increase in dues, largely to offset a decision to change your F&B minimum from $1,200 to $900. So in a sense, that's a flat dues raise. To you all as members, you didn't spend extra money is the point, right? Does that make sense to everyone? So from 2006 to 2008 is the first time you really had a noticeable stop in dues increases. Then it was compounded by a 6-year static dues line from 2009 through 2014 where the dues did not increase $1, stayed at $433, okay? And these are important because alongside that, you will see that the number of memberships has also declined, which is why your income or revenues are declining, paired with the fact that you stopped collecting transfer fees because the value of the membership changed, right? And all in all, you'll see over here the net impact, right? In 2001, you were at 1.9 million. 2017, you're at 1.7, right? Your high water marks are right in here. Okay, does that make sense? Follow me? Okay, so right now, 2018, you're projected to finish at $768,367. So comparatively speaking to 2017, you'll see your year-over-year decrease or increase. So technically, from a true what we collected or what we're projecting to collect in 2018, we're projecting to collect 3% more than we did last year. So that's a positive. Okay? Any questions before we go to the next slide? All right, next slide. Now we start getting into more data. This is where it will start to become more difficult to see. So please raise your hand if you have any questions. So what I did over here was I wanted to really dig into the dues because I will tell you that I've spent my entire career working for profit-minded owners of their club. There was never a point in time where breaking even was even remotely an acceptable outcome, right? It was always to make more money. Right? So when we talk about that, I will tell you every one of those clubs had a built-in static guarantee you can count on your dues increasing 3 to 5% every year. And the reason that those clubs do that is that the cost of doing business will generally be somewhere between 3 to 5% year over year as an increase. Cost of labor will increase, cost of resource will increase. Resource is everything from fertilizer to sand, you name it. It's everything that's not a body that works. That make sense? So what I wanted to look at here was, again, number of proprietary members. I mentioned that I will tell you how I came up with that math. Simple. I took the total dollars collected, divided it by 12, divided by the number or the amount of dues, and that's what gave me the number of dues paying members, right? Because every year you'll have members who come in and out, especially here where you have these transfer fees. You had a lot of in and outs there, right? Does that make sense? So what's interesting is that if you just looked at the dues study and said, what would it look like with a 3% or a 4% or a 5% increase? That's what this box is here. So I start with 2001, and I basically said, okay, here's what our dues actually were, and here's what our dues would have been in 2002 through 2017 if we just simply added 3%. And what you'll notice on the 3% column is that you actually outpaced your 3% dues growth almost until you got to 2015, where you caught up at 468. Right? So you look over here, these numbers are greater almost entirely until you get to that point, right? With the exception of a few years. Okay? Then you look at a 4% increase, and that catch-up point is closer. It's right there. Right in that range. Okay? So it's a few years earlier. And the reason I point this out is if a 5% increase were put into place, your catch-up point is right in here. Right? So the point is that the dues should have increased here, no question, to cover the costs. Because I will tell you that most of the criticism that I get about our current state of operation is compared to a previous state of operation. And that previous state that you hearken back to when you compare the levels of services that you're used to or you used to enjoy were most likely in this era, where you had 400 plus members and your dues were appropriate to the era and the number of members and the expectations of the club from an operational standpoint. Does that make sense? Over time, we have an increased dues. Our member count has fallen. Therefore, our total amount of money to use to spend to fulfill the experience has fallen. But the expectation hasn't stayed relative to that. I know that just through the 10 weeks I've been here and have had several people point out the shortcomings of our operation. And you're all right. Absolutely right. But I'm going to explain tonight kind of why we are where we are, right? So once we click past this is just a more visual aid, right? So these bottom numbers here, if you get into the PowerPoint, if you have a desire to do that, what I would tell you is that these numbers are so small, they're difficult to discern. But the most important one are these two. So the black line on top is your total dues income, okay? Total dues income is all of those categories I included, including transfer fees. This maroon line is your transfer fees. So you will see from just the shape and orientation how those two lines parallel each other to a certain extent. Yes, sir?
Could you remind me what transfer fees are?
So transfer fees would have been when a proprietary member owned a membership and sold that membership, and the club would retain a portion, right? And let me see how good I am on quoting this. 30% of the total or $2,500, whichever one's greater, correct? So as memberships were being sold for 20, 25, 30,000, as those memberships were bought and sold, the club retained transfer fee for those transactions, and those transactions netted $240,000, $300,000 a year. Okay? So again, this line up here is total dues income. Roger?
I have a question.
Yes.
You know, from 1996 to 2008, transfer fees were not included in operations. They were separated from the capital equipment funds, which was used differently. You're included in a full dues revenue.
In the statements I've been going through, Roger, from 2001, they were accounted for in dues revenue, based on the statement. Now, however it was organized in the balance sheet versus P&L and your ownership, right? I would tell you that for this, it's not a huge number.
It's not supposed to be used for operations during that period.
Okay, and Jen, I don't know if, yeah. I'm just adding it in as total dues income because that's where it's listed in the financial statements. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't left out.
But if it wasn't used for operations, then that would be correct.
It could, but to be honest with you, this gray line here is proprietary member dues, which is the most important point to make, right? That's just dues. And the problem is that you can see from 2001, you got all the way up to here, and you've just been steadily coming down. And if we don't correct that, it just continues. And the two options you have as owners is you can change your expectation of the day-to-day experiences you and your fellow members have here to match the amount of money you're collecting, or we have to collect more money. And we can do that by either selling more memberships, and we'll get into that later, or you pay more. Again, the beauty of me saying that is that that's just reporting the news, right? So those are our options. Just keep that in mind as we go through this, okay? So now when we get into food and beverage, this one I think is one of the most polarizing topics, not only for our club, but every club in the club industry world. Everybody is looking for the silver bullet to solve food and beverage, and everyone has the same problem. And that problem is that there are only 300 of you that can come dine here. And unless you all dine here a lot, you're going to lose money. Okay? And the reason you're going to lose money is, let's walk through this. So again, the left side of this chart is just for your knowledge. You had a $1,200 food and beverage minimum. That changed in 2007, right? I mentioned that earlier. Your total revenue from the F&B minimum is this number times the number of proprietary members, or I'm sorry, the total number of members, right, from the last slide. And that's what typically we should expect from $1,200 as a minimum with 440 members would be $532,000, okay? Now, it doesn't play into this because these numbers in these categories here are truly departmental profit or loss. So, in order to figure out whether we make money here at Hidden Valley in food and beverage, you have to add member dining and all that comes with it. Snack bar revenue, beverage cart revenue, all of that. Your beverage, which is separated into a different department. Your catering business, which is also captured in a different department. And then you have to put all of your kitchen expenses to it. And we also account for all of our kitchen expense in a different department. So what's important to make sure we understand is when I say food profit or loss, this is departmental. So this is all member dining, okay? So that includes all the labor for the servers. It includes all of the discretionary spend that you all contribute through the dining room, mixed grill, bar. All those revenues are accounted for. So all of these numbers, in essence, are captured between these two columns, right? Because those are your guaranteed minimums you have to spend. We charge you, you buy wine at the end of the year if you don't buy it, or use your minimum. But at the end of the day, this revenue is captured in these two lines. So these are nets. So when you think about that, you look at member dining. Keep in mind your kitchen expense is not included in that department. So every year, member dining looks like it makes money. Every year, beverage looks like it makes money. Every year, catering looks like it makes money. And then you apply the expense to fulfill those three categories. And then over here, you'll see all this red. So this is the 16, 17 years historical spread. And everything in green are the years you made money. Everything in red are the years you lost money. Okay? So you'll see in 2018, we're projecting to finish at a loss of $72,000. Last year, you lost $70,000. Year before that, you lost $78,000. Right? So food and beverage, to be quite honest with you, while there has probably been many different attempts to change how we operate food and beverage, the reality is, I would tell you as a business analyst, whatever you've done in the last 3 years is almost identical from a financial standpoint. The difference, to be honest with you, is you had also fewer members. Right? Look at the revenue number here. Went from 300 to 259. Okay, does that make sense so far? Everyone following along? The other thing I pointed out here is, first of all, in 2006, 2007, right, you shifted from $1,200 in food and beverage minimum to $900. The net effect of that was $129,000, right? Year over year, you lost $10,000, or I'm sorry, where's that at? So you made $2,700 that year, and then you shifted $300 per member away from food and beverage spend. And then you went immediately to basically right there. So you had about a $12,000 or $13,000 swing. And then from that point on, you had 1 year of recovery, which year over year was almost an $80,000 improvement. It's pretty good, right? So over here in 2010 versus 11, the reason I point this out, and this will be a reoccurring theme through this historical review, is 2010 through 2011, this is when the club really started to get set into the current, I won't call it funk, but the current state it's in. And the reason for it is you lost a net 50 proprietary members year over year. So just quick math on the 50 memberships from a dues contribution standpoint is roughly $260,000. And you pair with it a $900 food and beverage minimum, equates to another $45,000. So year over year, you whacked $300,000+ off of your top line. Your top line's never been even close to 3 million. Well, certainly not in this study. So you could argue that you lost probably close to 15% of your top line, and there was no adjustment made. So that would be an indication if people are looking for a smoking gun or looking for the person who pulled the trigger, I would tell you that, again, that gun doesn't exist, that person doesn't exist. I will applaud all of you who've participated in some level of leadership here at this club via committee or board, and I will show you that over the last 10, 15 years, that your board, your leaders have done a great job keeping the club alive. To be perfectly frank with you, right? This is a food and beverage issue that exists everywhere. I can tell you the club standard right now in the industry is to just accept that for every dollar you collect, it costs you $1.04 to collect it.
I don't see on there's the total revenue for food and beverage.
I'll show you in a second. Yeah, I try to keep this at a very macro level, try not to get into too much detail, because we can go in and dig in and I can show you the total number or the total amount of food and beverage spend, but the reality is I have to capture it in these three categories. That's why I just went with departmental profit. So it's
The figure is based upon what the total food and beverage
department.
was, not based on those figures.
No, this number right here, this projection, is no different than these numbers here, which is the complete aggregate of these departmental wins against this departmental loss.
Including the total food and beverage.
No, the food and beverage minimums and the income that comes from it is captured in these two columns. These are netted columns. So that what this means is that after we collected every dollar on things we sold food-wise, through snack bar, beverage cart, dining room, mixed grill, bar, and those would be your minimum dollars that you have to spend. After we paid all our bills, paid our staff, bought all our linen, changed out the napkins, cups, you name it, we generated $202,000. But I can show you the gross revenue line if you'd like. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to shift off of food and beverage real quick, but again, I hope that made sense. From a club industry standpoint, it is often referred to as the fact that, again, for every dollar you collect, it's going to cost you $1.04 to collect it. And the reason I point that out is that this club, Hidden Valley Country Club, does not have an unusual or a unique set of circumstances. You have exactly the same set of circumstances most clubs do, and I will tell you, most clubs are now getting very creative in how to fix that. I will tell you that you all as owners should do the same. Or accept that every year you're going to lose around $80,000 to $100,000 having the food and beverage operation that you currently have today, and change the expectation. The goal would be in that type of an operation to be great at breakfast, be great at lunch, in and around golf, and occasionally have a member event at night. But this business here is not built to have great, extravagant member parties, have the club always open for the hope that you come in and use it. And I apologize for saying it like that, but I've had a lot of folks ask about dinner tonight or bar being open tonight. And I'm happy to steer this business however you all as owners want it steered, but I will tell you right now, you're losing money. So if you choose to continue to lose money, that's fine. You just have to acknowledge that that's an anchor that's pulling the club down on an annual basis. Okay? So, next slide. We get into golf course maintenance, the biggest expense this club has. One of the things that I've shared in a lot of conversations about the golf course here is that without this golf course, there is no club. I don't believe you all would pay dues to come here and dine. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. So the golf course is the most important thing. And the other thing to remind you of, and I don't mean to be cheeky about this, but it is a living, breathing thing. So we can't talk about the golf course as something we can turn on and off. We can't talk about the golf course as something we can starve at any point in time with resource, water, or food. The golf course is a living, breathing thing. And as it ages, like we all do, we tend to have more issues that need to be attended to. Okay? And our golf course is no different. So when we talk about the golf course maintenance budget, what's very interesting to me is that we start with 2001. As a department, you spent $728,000 and change. In 2017, you spent $752,000 and change. Year over year, very small increase in total cost, right? And by just a raise of hands, just for reference, because I always throw this out, how many of you actually own or operate a business in here or did at some point in your lives? okay? It's most of you, okay? I don't know about you, but this business is no different than most businesses. Labor does not stay the same year over year, the cost of that labor anyway. And the cost of expenses, like in our world, a lot of our expenses, fertilizer-wise anyway, are tied to oil prices. So the cost of gas in 2001, I'm certain was lower than it was last year, right? So when I think about the evolution of costs between labor and expense, and I look at what we spent in 2001 and versus what we spent last year, that's shockingly low, to be quite honest with you. Because the real value of money between 2001 and 2017 would suggest that that number should be just from, let's say 3, maybe 4 or 5% more, right? If we look at cost of labor, cost of resource, should be 3 or 5% more, minimum, and it's not. It's very, very almost static, right? But one thing to dive into here is this one here I did just to give you again a color reference. So this is year over year increase or decrease starting from 2001. So 2002, you increased the budget by 3%. 2003, you increased the budget by 33%, okay? If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, did the golf course go through the renovation in '02, or did it open in '02? So work was done in '01, opened in '02. So one thing that's interesting, again, is if I was your paid consultant, I was your subject matter expert, I would tell you 2003's maintenance budget is odd. The cost of ownership to operate this golf course should have been the cheapest in 2003. You inherently paid for your maintenance in 2002 doing all the work to the golf course. Other than day-to-day mowing and going of the golf course, anyway, you should not have seen a 33% increase. Now, I can dig into the data to try to find out where, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. The reality is the club changed. We went from a 33% increase in '03 to a 16% decrease in '04. And golf course maintenance, I will tell you, year over year, you can see we've slowly put the brakes on, right? Your 3 highest spend years were in 2003, 2007, 2008. So your third or your last highest spend year was 10 years ago, okay? So now when we look over here, we look at salaries. This is the most important thing to look at in golf course maintenance. Most of golf course maintenance is labor. It's detail work, right? It's getting out, mowing or mowing the fairways, mowing the greens, right? How do we do it? Do we walk mow them? Do we use triplex mowers? All of those things end up determining the quality of our product, right? So when we look at salaries in 2001, we're at $420,000. And when we look at salaries in 2017, we're at $440,000. So when you look here, I did this quick study, right? 2001 versus 2017, it's a 5% increase. I don't know about your businesses, but I would assume that if you had a department like this, you would see more than a 5% increase in labor. The only way you got there is you actually have fewer people today than you did back then. And the reason I can tell you that is that the value of that year over year on just a 3% increase in salary, which is what it probably should have been, right? Cost of living adjustment is $254,000. So what I did was I said, okay, in 2001, what was minimum wage? It was $6. And right now I will tell you that every Monday night, I keep telling our team this story. Every Monday night I watch Monday Night Football. And every Monday night, Aramark is advertising that they'll hire anyone who can fog a mirror for $14.50 an hour here in Reno. And they'll train you up, we'll give you a career path, it'll be great. So that tells me the going rate of labor in this market has to be at least 13 or 14 bucks an hour. So for us, I said between $6 an hour and 13 or 14 an hour, I just said, what if it's 10? How much labor can I buy with $254,000 at 10 bucks an hour? What I can buy is 12.23 bodies who work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. And what that equates to is 480 man hours a week that I can tell you used to be up here in 2001. And it's not here with us anymore. So yes, our golf course was probably in better shape at some point in the past. So when you all make that statement, I agree with you. Because the financials say that you spend a lot more money, it should have been. But relatively speaking, your wages haven't stayed up. And so the way you've accommodated that is you have fewer maintenance people. At one point, we probably had 20 on our team. This year, I think Keith told me we had around 13 or 14. And that was inclusive of the part-time workers as well. He's probably in the 10, 11 when it comes to full-time equivalents. He was probably closer to 20 in 2001. Okay, does that make sense? So this over here is really what wages would look like at a 3%, 4%, and 5% increase, right? I would argue that you've had two major labor pushes in this market. The first one was in the early 2000s. I don't know when it began. I would argue it began in the late 90s, but it expired in probably 2006. In the last 3 or 4 years, you've had another massive labor push, right? And so when I think about what the true cost of labor inflation, I think it's probably between 4 and 5%, to be honest with you, at a minimum. But if you just went with 4%, in 2017, you spent $440,000 in salaries. At 4%, you should have spent $788. It's almost double, right? I can tell you that as an employee of all the enterprises and companies I've worked for, I do expect a 3% increase every year just to cover the cost of living, right? That's the standard. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think that we should have applied some kind of standard growth to our wage, not to continue to take someone who started at $6 an hour and give them 3%. It's so that we can fill the vacant positions so that the work on the golf course can get completed. So that you all can have the golf course that you're proud of and that has the type of detail that a club like this should have. Does that make sense? So resource, again, is everything that's not a body that doesn't work. Right? So this is your chemicals, this is your fertilizer, this is your herbicide, this is your sand, you name it. And we have the same issue. So over here, what I did is I just did a percentage of salary versus resource, and that was an easy equation. I just deducted salaries from total spend. That generated the total amount of resource spend. That resource, if you look at this, has toggled back and forth, and it's stayed fairly in range. 42 to say 46% on resource, and anywhere from, you call it over here 58 to, what does it say, down to maybe 54% on salary. Right? And that doesn't really tell anything other than just the percentage of salaries to expenses. But the reality is the salaries should be a much higher percentage of the total. Because the cost of the expense, right, the variable costs, that's somewhat task specific and doesn't grow at the same rate. But I assumed that gas goes up every year, right? So I use an example. Last year, for instance, this year versus last year in just fuel, we spent more than $12,000 more this year than we did last year. And the only reason for it is gas was $1 cheaper last year than it is this year, right? So gas was, let's say, $3 this year, and that last year is $2, right? That's a 30+% increase in that one line item. So I just suggested a similar 3, 4, and 5% increase on resource. And again, what we spent in 2017 at $321,000, if I was at 3%, it would be $494,000. If I was at 4%, it'd be $577,000. At 5%, it'd be $672,000, or double what we spent this year. So again, we've mitigated our golf course maintenance budget by way of pulling away bodies and supplies. So yes, when you tell me that the golf course was in better shape in the past, again, I believe you. It should have been. Right? And I will also tell you that Keith and team do more with what they have than any superintendent I've ever seen. So next time you see Keith and Franco and those guys, give them a big high five. Yeah? Okay. Now, I'm going to fly through this. We've got a lot more to cover. But you'll see over here, again, we just did golf course maintenance, right? In more detail. I didn't go through the same level of detail on the other departments, but I think you'll still see some of the same themes. So golf operations, right? So that's our golf shop. That's every green fee we collect from a guest. That's all your cart fees, your locker room fees, your trail fees, your cart storage fees, your contributions to the merchandise concession, and all of our expenses to run the golf operation, our outside service staff, our golf professional staff, you name it. So all in 2001, we made $11,000. High water mark in 2009, you made $145,000 in that department. Last year you made 17, and we are projecting to finish at 62,000 this year. Okay? So thank you to the Prospector Group, by the way, because we are going to finish November about 20,000 above budget, largely because of their contributions to our retail. So if you're part of the Prospectors, thank you. Chris Aramini, that was him. So over here, I also put down the projection for golf course maintenance. Okay? Golf course maintenance is projected to finish at $849. I've heard a lot of people tell me that we've overspent in golf course maintenance this year. I will tell you, yes, you spent about $80,000+ more than you did last year. Or as a department, you've lost, or we're projecting you're going to lose more. In a second, I'll tell you where we spent it. And as owners, I would tell you, you spent wisely. Because you are going to need to resuscitate the living, breathing thing that's called the golf course. Okay? So, when we go through salaries, 2001, you spent $179,000 on your labor in golf. And in 2017, you spent $152,000. You actually spend less. That's actually a great thing if you own the business. Terrible thing if you're a patron of the business. Right? Because what that means is we just have fewer people to serve you. Quite a few, right? We go into kitchen, right? Kitchen expense, kitchen salaries. The key to these colors, by the way, I should have disclosed that earlier. So the darkest shade of red is the highest level of loss in this 16-year study. The next shade of red is the second highest level of loss. The third pink shade is the third highest level of loss. Everything else is just not colored. Does that make sense? On the green, it's the high water mark, right? The 3 most consecutive high water marks. So the reason I did that is to show you that your leadership was very actively involved in changing the business throughout, really, I'd say from about 2003 through 2010. And then your leaders have done nothing. And I don't mean that to disparage those of you who were involved, because it's not what you did. You fought your tails off to keep the doors open. When I say you did nothing, you didn't fundamentally change anything in the business, and it stayed relatively static. The only impact was the decrease in total member counts. Look at all of your watermarks are above 2010. So what's interesting is we went through a period of adjustment, no different than most golf clubs. That period of adjustment started in 2007 and went well beyond 2010. There are plenty of golf clubs who are still trying to correct.
Hey, Mike, when you finish members, as you said, and stuff, shouldn't you spend less in salaries if you're serving half the membership?
Not necessarily.
So those expenses leveled out or like that?
To that extent, yes. Some leveling out and some relativity to staff count to member count is there. But the reality is that you all pay dues to come unannounced. You pay to own a business that the doors are open based on the stated operation, right? Right now we're currently in winter operations. We're going to tell you the business is going to close at 5. Well, we're going to be open till 5, whether it's snowing outside, right? So you do have to have some correlation, right? And I will tell you that while you managed the survival over the last 10 plus years, you did so because you had some fat to get rid of relative to your decrease in members. You're currently at the bone. So in order to continue to flex and flow, Roger, right, from an accounting standpoint, you would have to start closing significant portions of the club down. Because you really, again, you've done it over the years. Think about all the alterations to the day-to-day business, right? The snack bar used to be open different hours than it is today, right? Your golf operation used to be different. Your food and beverage used to be different, right? So these are things that we have to be mindful, and we'll get to the conclusion, and there is a conclusion to all this. So we'll get there, okay? Does that answer your question, Roger?
Yes.
I mean, I could tell you probably after a week of studying it what the real numbers should be, but I will tell you to be that close year over year is startling. So salaries here, your high water mark was $263,000. You hemorrhaged it right here in 2010 to 11, right? So your high water mark staff-wise was in 2007. Yeah, you were at 260 in 2005, and then you went to 232, 263, 262, 220, 205, and you've kind of steadily come down since. So there's no question in here, you have scaled back, no doubt. Partially because of necessity, partially because we probably weren't able to fill the seats, right? So we get into administration, right? That's a department here. You'll look at your 3 high water marks. This is a loss department, does not collect any money. So your worst loss was in 2006 or 7, I think it's 2007, 739,000. Last year you were at 590. This year we're projecting to be at 631. I'll explain that difference when we get to the next slide or two. I can't remember where it's at. Salaries, again, you can see in here, right? High water mark was 319. Last year at 244, you were at 210. Right? These themes of salaries have generally, they're pretty much the same. They might be in different years, but they're generally in the same era. Okay? House and grounds. Over here, your high water mark in spend was $382,000 in 2006. Last year you spent $322,000. Again, you all own businesses or operate them in buildings. This building, no different than most, gets more expensive to operate year over year. It should, to a certain extent, especially if you're not paying for it, which you're not, right? But the cost of operating it and the cost of maintaining it should increase. Interestingly enough, it hasn't, right? You look at in 2007, you spent $150,000 in salaries in this department, and this year or last year you spent $100,000. It's a 30+% reduction in staff. So of course the clock on the driving range still isn't fixed, and other things aren't still fixed, right? So this theme of labor reduction resides in every department, right? Okay, pool. Lots of conversation about the pool, right? I don't remember the pool before it was renovated in 2010. I kind of remember it from my childhood. I don't know a lot of the strategy behind the improvements. And if I was just being an analyst who didn't pay attention to details and didn't have a concern, I would tell you that whatever money you spent on the pool cost you more money to operate it after you opened it. Because your 3 highest spend years came directly after your renovation. I don't know if that's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just a statement of fact. Those are the numbers. What's interesting, though, is the pool will continue to cost you 30 to 40 grand a year. And I'm not sure if that's acceptable. You have to determine that, right? Do you want lifeguards on your deck? Okay, fine, then that number is going to grow. That's probably why you were at $57,000 in expense 3 years ago. Does that make sense? Okay, so pool salaries, you can see in here, that's, I believe, largely contingent upon lifeguards or no lifeguards, right? But when we get into Kids Club, another interesting discussion, right? Kids Club, I was told, made tens of thousands of dollars. At its peak, which was last year, it made 7 net. So I can tell you that that is capturing, again, just the labor to fulfill the Kids Club. Those are the counselors that put on the program, but does not include the additional costs of Jennifer's time to account for it, Bill's time to clean up the room, get it ready, whatever the case may be. But what I will tell you is that this year we're projecting a $628 loss. So we've got to make up 7 grand from last year. The net effect to you all is $2.11 per month. That's the value of that $7,000 win last year in that department. So again, the decision you all need to make is, do you want to have a kids club? What I've learned through this right here is that we largely cater to, I won't say majority, but I will say you had a lot of non-member kids in kids club last year. Maybe you made a change this year, but that's why you probably went from making 7 grand to losing 600, right? But I'm going to tell you at the end that I need direction from our board and the committees on how to build your business plan for next year. One of the things that we will be asking you, and Justice Hardesty will at the very end conclude this discussion, but we are going to ask you to participate in the member survey. And through that survey, we're going to ask you questions like, should we have a kids club? And the reason why we wanted to have this discussion tonight is so you understand what it means to have a kids club, right? So you can understand what it means to extend the operating hours in, say, food and beverage, whatever the case may be. Because it's not my business. I am gainfully employed by y'all to run your business. And you just need to tell us as staff how you want to run it. Does that make sense? Okay? So, now we get into where we are today. So, apologize that it took some time, but we'll rattle through this. So this is what we review every month in the Finance Committee. Those of you who participate, right, Roger, a few of you that I recognize that participate in that committee, thank you for all your efforts, right? This is the statement. This is the exact statement that we reviewed a few weeks ago to go through the business concluding 10 months of operation through October, okay? Can any of you see this, by the way? Okay, so I will rattle through it as best I can. What's important is, again, the theme of the presentation so far has been consistent and in order with these columns. So we started talking about membership dues, then we went to food and beverage, then we went to golf hops, then went to swimming pool, kids club, etc. Right? So here we have year-to-date October actuals, right? And then here we have a theory, and the theory is important to understand. The theory is this is what 2017's November was, and this is what December of 2017's actuals were. And that is so that we could project an outcome finish, because we believe November, December will be very similar to last year's November, December. We don't want to necessarily take the 10-month pace of spend in 2018, because if we do that, that's what these numbers are. So the net is currently we're projecting a negative cash flow of $148,000. Okay, and it's very important that everyone either A, you understand that, you have no questions, B, if you have a question, please ask. But it's very important to understand cash flow in this exercise, because technically what we're projecting is to be $417,000 in the hole from an operational standpoint. So again, starting from the beginning, we collect all this money, we pay it all out to fulfill the experience that you all want to have. Currently, that's $417,000 behind. But as a club, we like to apply our depreciation, right? Depreciating expenses. And when we apply the depreciation to it, it generates a negative cash flow of $148,000, right? That has to be corrected. You own a business that technically shouldn't fail, right? Failing here, I got asked that question a week or two ago. What does a club look like when it fails? Well, it can look a number of different ways, right? But it starts with not being able to pay your bills, right? And the minute you start not being able to pay your bills from a reputation standpoint, it's a 2 to 3 year impact. So if the market knows you have financial troubles, for 2 to 3 years, that will be the response to every one of your friends when you ask them to join this club. Is the club solvent? Is the club going to survive? So this is an important number that we have to chew on. We not only have to chew on it now to correct it, but we also have to be mindful of this number going into the business planning for next year. Because if not, we might as well reserve this date next year. And the good news is I won't have to redo this PowerPoint. And I'll give you the same exact message next year, okay? But when we shift over here, one of the things, so this is again the same thing, but one of the things that came up when we were reviewing this is how do these numbers compare to budget, right? Budgets typically in a business should be some kind of map for the staff to use. And again, I can't necessarily give any opinion about whether the budget for 2018 was right, wrong, or indifferent. I don't know what the assumptions were made. I don't know how it was built. What I will tell you is just I can show you where we are in relationship to budget. So for instance, membership dues, we budgeted $1,818,000 and change. We project to finish at $1,768,000, a $49,000 difference. Right? So no question the budget must have had some assumptions for additional membership sales that probably didn't necessarily realize. The truth of the matter is, how many new members have we had, Jen? 82? So we have had 82 new members in, but we've had a lot of members out, right? The net effect in dues was $49,000, okay? Food and beverage, last year, again, keep in mind we lost $70,000, and this year we had a budget that we started with that said we were going to make $33,000. So that was a $106,000 swing, right? So when I tell you that from a pure budget standpoint, we were projected to be $188,000 behind budget, 106 of it was food and beverage. And I'm not sure it's a miss as much as it was maybe just overly optimistic. I don't know, maybe you all said, hey, the food here is amazing, I'm coming 4 days a week next year. I don't know. But what I will tell you is that I can tell you most of you, if you owned a business, you would need a really serious set of assumptions to approve that big of an increase year over year, right? We get into golf operations. We are $297 off from what we budgeted to what we project to finish at. And I will tell you that number is going to be actually much higher because the month of November for golf is great. Now, that's obviously also hopeful that December is great. And if it is, then I believe that we will actually come in greater than what we project. I don't know yet. We'll find out. Okay? Then we go down to swimming pool, kids club, et cetera, et cetera. Golf course maintenance budgeted at $818 for the year, projected to finish at $849, a $31,000 increase. And I've heard some folks reference that was, and I hate to quote you, reckless spending. Absolutely unnecessary. Well, I will tell you that you spent $65,000 buying equipment. That's included in that $30,000 delta. You also spent $12,000 more on fuel. I mentioned that earlier, just for a simple dollar increase in the price of gas. You also spent $12,000 on sand that we didn't do in the fairways from a top dressing standpoint. And we did a number of other things to prop up the health of the golf course. So what I would tell all of you as owners is you spent wisely on the golf course. And you need to continue to spend wisely on the golf course. It is your asset. You currently own a land and water asset. And if you don't want to operate at a golf course on it, you could certainly decide to operate something else on it. But right now, I would tell you the golf course is the best use of the land, and therefore you need to make sure that the golf course is attractive and sellable. Because the net conclusion on all this is that this all gets better when you have 400 members. Unfortunately, it's not very good for the 276 current proprietary members. Because the 124 members who aren't paying dues every month, unless you all want to change the expectations of your experience here, you have to pay for that. And again, don't shoot me. I'm just reading the news, right? I'm not the culprit. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so I just showed you your $148,000 cash flow issue. So the board did approve a week or two ago at the last board meeting for them to exercise their right to assess up to $400 to the proprietary member. We need to. In doing so, and you'll see up here, okay, Hidden Valley Board approves $400 assessment for proprietary members on November 15th. Will be billed on December 1st. So Saturday, all of you will get that charged to your account. When you see your statement that will come in the first, second, third, or fourth day of January, you'll see that charge. Okay? Now, what we did talk about is, well, first of all, it's all proprietary memberships, and Jen did remind me I didn't have to fix this slide that we do actually have one proprietary social, so that one needs to be included. But the reality is these non-proprietary categories technically don't get assessed. We are going to find a way to creatively put it on the statement and invite them to participate. It's their club too, right? They eat here, they use the club. And the truth of the matter is we wanted to figure out the right way to approach that. So the $400 relative to your $479 is roughly 84%. So we applied that 84% to the dues load for each category. And we are going to highly recommend that they voluntarily contribute alongside you all to curing this deficit. If everyone participates, it's $136,000. We're $148,000 behind. So it will largely cure that loss. So, yes? So if you're this first-year membership, and there are 28 of them, we're going to tell them, hey, everybody, your fellow members, predominantly your proprietary members, are all going to get the privilege of paying more money to have kept the doors open for you as well. And so if you really don't want to feel guilty about them paying for your patronage, you should participate. And if anyone has any questions about that, send them my way. I'll be happy to tell them. Right? They do not have to. It will be a voluntary, right? We can't force it. But I will tell you that in some of my rhetoric to the board, I will recommend that they amend future forward because certain categories should, right? Again, I don't want to pick on any particular category, right? But I will tell you, for instance, junior executive, there's no reason they shouldn't be participating in this. They have a hell of a deal to join here right now. Right? So they should absolutely participate. Right? But right now, currently based on the rules and the rule book, they don't have to. So we will politely encourage them to. Okay? Any questions on this?
Who is the proprietor to social member?
What
is Mimi?
That is one.
Mimi Soul.
There you go.
But what is it? I mean, why is it?
I believe it's
different than being a social member?
yes, and to the extent that they get to vote.
So
She
pay more
upfront. She pays what we pay.
Oh, that's fine. I just didn't know what it was. That's what I wanted to know.
Okay? So again, one of the most important things is that we have to correct what we did this year to avoid this next year. So I've had a lot of people ask me questions because I'm also currently working on the 2019 budget. And so the curiosity is out there. Everyone wants to know, well, how much are we going to pay in dues? And I don't know. I really don't know. I will tell you this, and this is, follow me on this math, okay? So we are going to charge the proprietary members $400, right? In theory, if you all as proprietary members paid $100 more a month, that would be $1,200, right? Follow my math? So 400 is a third of that, or roughly $33 a month. So you can expect 2019 to be at least $33 more expensive a month to avoid this conversation next year, if we operate at the exact same standard and have the exact same number of members. That's not assuming any decrease in membership, and certainly not assuming any growth in the membership. But if you truly just replicated how you operated in 2018 and 2019, it would cost you roughly $33 to $34 more per month to avoid having to meet with me 2 days after Thanksgiving or the week after Thanksgiving and tell you that you're going to have an assessment. Does that make sense? Okay? But I don't think that's where it stops, but it really stops at this point. Because at this point, what I need going forward is to understand what your wants and desires are to build a business plan to achieve that. Right? How do you want to be served at your club? I can't tell you the number of times in the last 10 weeks I've had members tell me how not only disappointed but embarrassed they are of their club. And that's a shame. I mean, to be honest with you, it doesn't necessarily hurt my feelings. It probably will in the future. But it's a shame because you own it. And I will tell you the most important thing, and I've said it before, is for you to be full. If you want this to be the most economically friendly environment for you all as members, then having 400 memberships is key. And selling memberships is an important part of our strategy going forward. But I can promise you we aren't going to sell them by selling them through advertisements in magazines. We're not going to sell them through commercials during the US Open. We're not going to sell them by way of trade agreements through other television channels. We're going to sell memberships here by way of you coming and leaving this club satisfied. And the minute you all are generally, or the majority of you are satisfied with your club, I can promise you you'll start to see increase in your membership count. Because nobody wants to go to a miserable place. Nobody will dine at a restaurant that's empty. Nobody will even pull in the parking lot if there's no cars there. Right? So I used this analogy or example in the past is if, again, I mentioned you own a land and water asset, and if you didn't operate a golf course, you could operate a campground here. Maybe those of you who own homes here wouldn't want that. But it would be an acceptable use of the land, right? But follow me in this example. You now don't own a golf club, you own a campground. And you own that campground so that you can enjoy it because you're all campers. So follow me on this exercise, right? The problem is you're largely contingent upon the fees you collect from other campers to sustain the experience you want to have at your campground. The difference is you all tell everyone to stay away. This place is miserable. It's absolutely awful. Food's terrible. Service is terrible. Right now, again, I'm playing around and bringing some levity to the conversation, but you as a membership have a choice. And that choice is to really own your club, literally and figuratively. And part of owning your club is to sell it. I don't think we will ever be able to sell this club as well as you will. And those conversations are simple. You go to dinner with friends. They ask you about your club. What do you say? Truthfully, what do you say today? Right? Right? Well, I can tell you that my friends in the golf industry away from Reno, when I told them I'm moving back to Reno, Nevada, and I'm going to go be the GM at Hidden Valley Country Club, they went, what? Where's that? Never even heard of it. I said, it doesn't matter. It's personal for me. Right? I made a decision to move my family here and to change my life for this place. So it is disappointing to hear that you all are embarrassed about your club. Right? I'm not embarrassed to be here. I'm proud to tell everyone where I'm at. I'm proud to tell the people, including my former boss, who I talk to regularly on my trip here, including my first week here, who is the former CEO of the PGA of America. That's who I reported to. And he wants to know, how's it going? What do you think? I said, it's awesome. This place is incredible. It is a blank canvas, and it is so ripe for opportunity right now. It is, right? But I can assure you that I won't start painting the picture until you tell me what you want to see. And that's where we get into these next steps. Okay? So it's time to change. Okay? This right here is where we, the collective we being the club, has been. Right? And you start right here with restricted capital investment. So what happens when the things start to get scary financially? You stop contributing to it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pump brakes. Right? And then you go over here, you start to lower or to decrease your amenities and your services, right? So narrower amenities and deteriorating facilities leads to low member satisfaction and lower demand, which then leads to lower initiation fees and fewer members. Sound familiar? Then we get into decreased capital. Now we have issues. We don't have any money to fix it. Then we get into lower return on invested capital. Again, you own this. I don't know what the appraised value of this property was in 2001, and I don't know what it is today, but I can assure you it's worth more now than it was then. For those of you who live here, I will tell you that I think Hidden Valley in the next 5 to 10 years will be the real estate hotspot in this valley. You can quote me on it, it's on film, right there. 5 to 10 years from now. Because you'll never build another Hidden Valley in the Truckee Meadows. You won't be able to build streets as wide as these streets. You won't see lots this size. And so what will happen, and I've seen this through all my time in other development projects, is people will come in and start buying the distressed homes in this community, chopping them down, and rebuilding very impressive homes. It's all already happening on number 10, right? But I can tell you it won't happen if this golf club doesn't perform. It won't happen if this club fails. And so, again, for those of you who live around the community or around the golf course, you even have more interest in making sure that we do the right things here. So, we need to jump over to this positive cycle, and it starts with conversation about how to address capital. We've talked about financials based on operations. The one thing I didn't talk about is the fact that we have no capital reserves to speak of. Right? We do have issues. We will have issues. The irrigation system has been a topic of discussion for you all since 2002 when you did your renovation. The system did not get better over the last 16 years. It's not like wine. It does not get better. Okay? So we get over here, we start talking about figuring out a way to change the model. If we figured out a way to increase the capital here, which there is ways, you own land, you own water. On December 10th, we're going to tell you a lot more about the water you own so that you're better prepared to make a decision in the future when that's presented to you. But once we start getting into the capital, then we can start to expand the amenities and have a more attractive facility. Once you do that, you all will be happier. I promise. Promise. The more you spend, the happier you get. I'm kidding. But increased member satisfaction, right? And interest in joining. That's key, right? I can promise you, if you all collectively gave your opinions and painted the picture of what you want here and walked out of this room tonight, universally bound by that plan and committed to it, you could start selling memberships tomorrow for $5 or $10 grand. Promise you. I sold $70 million, I didn't personally, I participated on a team that sold $70 million in real estate by showing pictures on the wall in 24 hours. We showed a bunch of pictures and said, hey, pick. This is the picture we're painted. You want to be part of it? It's a privilege. And I think, to be honest with you, how many people live in Reno now? I've just new back. I've heard 700,000. Does that sound right, Justice? You only need 400 who want to have the same experience that you all want to have. That's it. Just 400. That should be easy. Right? It should be really easy in the grand scheme of things. But right now, I will tell you that if I truly asked you that question about your club and how you feel about it, there would not be very consistent answers. They would range from somewhat satisfied to completely dissatisfied, right? But none of that's going to sell this club. So now we get into next steps. Next steps are, I mentioned I'm currently building budgets. The budgets are being built off a zero-based plan. I know we talk about zero-based budgets, but I don't know how many of you have ever built it. They take a tremendous amount of time because the most important thing to consider is time and motion. And that's what we've been studying, time and motion on the golf course. How long does it take us to do things around the golf course? And therefore, how much does it cost to do those things? So currently we're in that. We will also be building the budget as of now until we get more information based on last year or this year, 2018. I will be incorporating a few additional elements that have been requested from the committees for more touch points of service. I think they're important. They're important for more reasons than just what you think. So having a starter on the first tee, super important. We need to make sure we pay attention to who's teeing off the first tee. At a minimum, we need to make sure they're members. Right? And I'm not suggesting that we have non-members, but I can tell you we don't have anyone at the gate. There's nothing that will stop someone, and I can tell you with some good Jedi mind tricks, I could walk in here on any given day and pretend like I'm a member and go tee off the first tee and promise you that first time, no one asks a question. If I do it enough and I know enough people, pretty soon you'll just think I'm a member because I'm here all the time. And guess what? That happens. I sniffed that out in Texas my first 2 months. I kept seeing the same guy in the locker room every day. And finally I went and sat down and started talking to him, wanted to know his story. Hey, what do you enjoy about the club? Right? So I made him give me his name. Lo and behold, he's not even a member. He's hanging out in the locker room every day. Right? Okay? A range attendant, very important. Right? Service-based. Parking lot. I moved the carts to the parking lot for a reason. We don't have a gate. We need a gate. So right now, the staff in the parking lot are de facto gate. Yes, they're there to bring you a cart and service you better or faster, but they're also there to make sure you're a member. In the absence of a gate, we need to have body there, right? So I will be building a few of those. First draft I hope to have done in about 2 weeks, and then I'll be presenting it to the board, and we'll be talking through finance committee and all the above. So I'm about 2 weeks away. This budget will reflect realistic revenues. I am not going to build this budget speculating that we're going to sell 50 more memberships next year. Just not. It's not real. And I don't want to be back here next year. I hope this is the last time I have to actually tell you the bad news of an assessment. Honestly. Okay? Okay. So, when I mentioned that we're building it from scratch, I just wanted to show you the process. Okay? So this is a table that we set up to just figure out how much time it takes us to care for our greens. There are 18 of them. Well, technically there are 20. All right, we have the 2 practice greens, we have 18 regular greens. And you can't see the details, so I'm just going to kind of show you. Starts with aerification, alphabetically all the way down into weed eat detail. These are all tasks. This first column here is the number of people it takes to accomplish the task. The next column is the number of man hours it takes to accomplish the task with those people. So for instance, when we aerify, it takes 10 people, 16 hours to aerify the greens. So we plan on aerifying in April one time and in September one time. And so each time we do it, it's 160 hours. Does that make sense? Okay? So we literally went through and did this for every single thing we do to the golf course. That's why there's so many tasks for just greens. And in the end, I will tell you that currently it takes 4,700 man hours a year for us to care for the greens. Now, I'm going to tell you the average rate of pay in this department. I just got through telling you how few people we have still working. Guess what? They work overtime. So the average rate of pay isn't what they currently make. It's inclusive of their overtime load. So this number is probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 16 bucks an hour. So we'll be able to tell you how much it costs to maintain your golf course. And if you say that's too much, I tell you what you want to change. Right? Do you not want to walk mow the greens 6 days a week? We can change that. We can triplex the greens 3 days a week and walk mow 3 days a week. Right? When we get to the collars, we typically only mow the collars twice a week. I think that's too few. We should do it at least 3. We create a better stand of turf in the collar and the approach for us to play off of. Right? But that costs more money to go from 2 times a week to 3. Does that make sense? So the good news is that this is the lion's share of the project, and we're nearly done. We're about 90% complete. Once this is done, Ken and I have met. We've done the same thing for golf operations. And so every layer of the business will be built this way. And so I will be able to absolutely stand before you and very confidently tell you that I do know exactly what it costs. Right down to the extent of what it costs to maintain the greens. What do you want to know? Want to know how much it costs to maintain the bunkers? I can share that with you. Does that make sense? So, we will finish this process. And the reason we will do that is so we can get to this step. So you do have one question to answer. And that is about your future. right? So I'm going to turn the mic over to Justice Hardesty, but as a segue to him, and I've made allusion to this throughout the presentation, your participation and your fellow members' participation in this upcoming member survey will be these 55 minutes of answering or asking all the right questions so that we can make sure we answer the question right the first time. Make sense? So, next steps, Justice Hardesty.
So thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. What a tremendous overview of where we've been, and we have a little bit of information to share with you about where we're going to go. So, a couple things. As you know, on the 10th of December, we're going to have a member meeting, another town hall, the third in this series, that will discuss with you in tremendous specifics our water rights and the what's available, how they can be used, what is being used, what isn't being used, and what might be available to assist with respect to some of the capital needs that the club has. A lot of research has been devoted to this. There's been decades of discussions about Hidden Valley's water rights. But I think we've arrived at a lot of important conclusions as a result of meetings directly with the state engineer's office and representatives in the state engineer's office. And all of that will be provided to you on the 10th, an overview of those water rights and what we can expect and how we would hope to be able to move forward as a result of it. And then the next meeting is December 17th, and that is a meeting that's been scheduled to essentially wrap up the town halls with an overview of what is being done with the Strategic Planning Committee. Last summer, the board approached me about serving as chairman of the Strategic Planning Committee. Not something I have time for. But I do believe that one of the things this club definitely needs is to develop a strategic plan. We need to know where we're headed in a variety of areas if we're going to be at all successful as a business. So, to begin that process, we need to canvass our members to know what expectations you want to be provided through this club. So this is a process that is completely dependent upon your participation. So it begins with a survey, a member survey. It also includes a staff survey. We completed the questions, the committee completed the questions for the staff survey. That is ongoing. I think that was circulated to staff yesterday. We expect to get the responses from them within the next couple of weeks. The member survey has been edited. It's being edited again tomorrow. The committee will take the survey first for the purpose of determining what glitches may exist either in language or in responses and how to develop our information from it. And then once that final editing process is done, after the committee members have taken it, it'll be circulated to all of you. Couple things. First of all, the staff survey is confidential. The staff members are taking the survey through Applied, and that's, of course, the HR group for the club. So the staff has been invited by the Strategic Planning Committee to respond to the staff survey with frank responses and suggestions. And no one will know, including the general manager, the board, or anybody, what their thoughts were, what their responses were. And these are all in sliding scales of satisfaction or dissatisfaction, with the exception of two areas at the end where we pose two general questions and invite their input and suggestions. The same is true with respect to the member survey. The member survey is also confidential. Confidential in the sense that your responses will only be known by you. We're going to go through a monkey survey to reduce the cost of tabulating the responses from the membership. And we're urging all of you, that includes the named proprietary member, but also their spouse or significant other, to participate in that survey. And so, in order to participate through the monkey survey, you must be registered. So if a member is not registered, we want you to get registered. If your significant other or spouse is not registered, we want to get you registered so that then you can go on to the club's website and participate in the membership survey on the website. We will know that you participated. We will not know what you said. What we will be doing is tabulating the results from the survey without knowing who it was that supplied the survey. That's important with one exception. At the end, we have essentially 4 questions that we pose to you where you'll be able to articulate your suggestions for the future of the club, answering some very interesting questions. Like, for example, what are we? Are we a country club? Are we a golf club? Are we something else? Now, if you put in those responses something that identifies you, then that'll get tabulated and we'll know who the respondent was on that question. But if you simply fill it out generically without stating your name, we won't know who you are, but we'll have the benefit of your input. The other thing is we're hoping to get 100% response from the membership. So people can elect to respond or not respond. But I will track you down. And I mean it. We're going to find you and get your responses. Because after the survey results have been tabulated, the committee is going to begin a process of holding focus group meetings here at the club. We will then drag you in here, and we'll ask you if you've taken the survey, you can respond or not, but we'll ask you again similar questions contained in the survey. But we're going to do more than that. You'll come in groups of 11 or 12 or 13, and we'll be able to go over a number of issues face to face that you think drive the club. The purpose of all of this is to develop the expectations our membership have so that those expectations can be translated into dollars. That's the whole point of this exercise. So this is a membership-driven plan and a membership-driven effort by the committee. The Strategic Planning Committee has had 4 meetings. Most of them have gone somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. I've scheduled about 4 more. They've been very healthy discussions. They started off similar to what Mike was talking about before. I think the first 2 hours of the first meeting could be generally summarized as a bitch session about all the things that are negative about the club. But at the end of the day, if that's the approach that's going to be taken, we will fail. It's time for us to step up, identify the positives about the club, improve the things that we feel negative about, and become ambassadors for the club. Indeed, there is a question, and I hope everybody will answer truthfully. Do you consider yourself to be an ambassador for Hidden Valley Country Club? When you are having conversations with your friends or other club members, do you consider yourself to be an ambassador of Hidden Valley Country Club? Because if the reputation that the club has in the community is negative, we will never achieve 400 members. I don't care what the population of this area is. So it's critical that we begin to develop a membership-driven expectation, put put the dollars next to that expectation, and at the same time, understand what your needs and desires and efforts are, or expectations are for the club. Eventually, the Strategic Planning Committee will develop a plan. That plan will include strategies for membership, water, golf course, food and beverage, club governance, the pro shop, etc. There's probably about 8 or 9 categories. The plan itself will be embodied in a document. It'll be submitted to the board. Everybody will have an opportunity to comment on it. And once the plan is put in place, under the amendment to the bylaws that were made by the club, or by the board of directors this summer, they created the Strategic Planning Committee. The plan can only be changed by a vote of the membership. So there's a lot of work that's going into this effort. All the product will all be directed by what you want to do. So I hope you'll participate actively in this process. Register even starting tomorrow, right, Jennifer? If you haven't registered, please go on the registration. Now, I know you can't see this slide, but like the other portions of the presentation, all of these slides will be able to be pulled up on the website so you can read it and see what this is about. But in addition to that, we're going to send out an email to everybody reminding you of the process and showing the process to register if you haven't registered. So, yes, Vicki.
We are registered, but our username is our member number.
Correct.
So how are we going to have?
Well, I don't know which one of you holds the member,
Well,
but
that's
one of you
right.
is,
So how does
one of
that
you has the
work?
member number, and then next to it is the member number A.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what you'll respond
How
with.
are we doing that?
So in our household, my member number, I'll register under our number, and then Sandy will register under our number A. And yes. Yes. Correct. Nope, we are canvassing everybody who touches this club and everybody who is a user. Now, I will say this. There'll be 2 tabulations. One will be a tabulation of all of the results, but there will be a separate tabulation for proprietary membership. And there's a reason for that, and part of it has to do with finances, but it also has to do with the fact that you do have a number of people here who do not have a spouse or a significant other. They're a single member. And so if we don't want to skew the results to a household, we want to find out for sure what all proprietary members prefer. So in order to give equal weight, we're going to take a separate calculation of the results on the proprietary membership only. That takes into account, a number of people, frankly, who have a single membership or don't have a significant other. Yes.
Would that include social members?
Yes.
It does?
Junior executives, legacies, everybody. Everybody.
Will the questions all be the same?
Yes.
Or all the-
Yes. Yep. Yes.
I don't have them here.
Right. So, this is not the only way the survey will be distributed. Anybody who can't log on and handle it or participate through the website, you'll get a hard copy, and you'll be asked to provide the hard copy. And with regard to confidentiality, we're going to handle the responses for those who want to participate through a hard copy exactly the same way we do the voting for board members. So you'll fill out the survey, don't sign it, insert it in an envelope, sign the envelope, insert the envelope in another envelope, and bring it to the club. And that will all be confidential. Yes, ma'am. If it's a smartphone. If it's a flip phone, I don't think that's going to work. Yes, sir.
Will the survey include, I'll say
Yeah.
cover letter that clearly explains the importance of the membership's response, especially for those people that weren't here tonight.
Yes, and it already is included at the very opening of the survey. When you open it, there's a paragraph up there that explains how we got to where we are and why it's important you're doing what you're doing. So that is already on the top of the survey itself. Okay? I'd like to ask the members of the Strategic Planning Committee who are here to stand up so you can see who that is if they're present. In addition to these folks is Joey Orduna Hastings, who is a junior executive member and, as some of you may know, is the executive director of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. And let's see, John Giusti, who's not here, I don't think. And Bruce Breslow is on the committee. And the committee represents essentially every membership group. So that was how it was selected. Feel free to offer input or suggestions or observations to the committee members. I applaud them for all their hard work. There's been a lot so far and a lot yet to do. As for focus groups, you'll get a card from me inviting you to come on a given evening, and hopefully you'll come. If you don't, myself or a committee member is going to call you. And I'm sincere in saying that we will track you down. We want to know what the membership thinks so that we can have a good understanding of the results. Now, one more point. We've taken a lot of surveys at this club, and we haven't known what the results were. You will know what the results are, both with respect to the proprietary results as well as the collective results. Why is that important? Because you need to be able to debate the results going forward as to what's going to end up being in the plan. Now, one of the reasons that the Strategic Planning Committee asked the board to do what is taking place right now is so that you'd have some information basis on which to respond to the surveys and participate in this discussion. It doesn't make any sense to ask our membership what do they think about financial issues in the club when you don't have a clue what the financial situation is. That was the reason for Mike's presentation. It doesn't do any good for us to ask you information about water issues. First, they're complex, but second, you've never been really had that explained to you as a group. So that's why this is taking place. And with regard to the strategic plan itself, I'll be going through a whole bunch of slides similar to this on the 17th that outlines what is strategic planning and how does it operate. This is not unique to this club. Strategic planning and this process is taking place in clubs throughout the United States. It's just kind of new for us, this process. So, does anybody have any questions about this process and what we're doing on next steps? Yes, ma'am.
Just a second. Mike would know because he's been in a couple of different clubs. I'm looking around this room, and what is the trend with young people becoming members, young people all over? We want to encourage new members, but what can we do for those, I mean, looking at us, in 20 years, we might not all be sitting here. So we need the younger members, and we want to, how are you going to encourage them?
How are we going to encourage them? That's precisely one of the subject matters of the membership.
Cool. That's all.
When we can talk all we want, let's go get new members. Well, what's the plan for doing that? What's the target group we're going to go after? Those are the things that the Strategic Planning Committee has been debating. But your input is important to that. Now, we think we've identified several groups we could attack. We've never had a plan to go after them. And we're talking about that age group. Reno Lions Club is not where we're going to find future members from Hidden Valley Country. But there is a huge segment of the Prospectors Club, which is a target-rich environment. So how does one develop that? And I don't know if you've noticed it, but there have been a number of members who've joined this club who are a lot younger than me this year. And that group is a source for getting additional people. And but we need to have that plan in place, and then we need to implement it. And that's just one example when we talk about membership. The last thing that I want to talk about in terms of the strategic planning effort is capital. Mike touched on this. He provided you financial statements that talk about operating. We have no capital resources. And frankly, the club is in a precipice. If we don't find a way to fund a sustained capital effort, then we'll have serious problems if we have a serious capital problem, like an irrigation failure. So how we proceed to fund the capital needs of the club is critical. You saw his spinning wheels, green and red. We need to be able to feed the capital needs of this club. But here's the question, and this is the key point that the Strategic Planning Committee raised. For what? What are we going to buy? Well, the purpose of the survey and the purpose of the focus group is for you to tell us what we need to buy. Now, we know what certain needs are. For example, there was a asset replacement study done in 2010 that suggested we should spend $4 million by now. We've spent less than $300,000 of that $4 million. But when you look at the asset replacement survey, there's some things on there you wouldn't spend it for if the membership had a different preference. So your preferences are critical to building what the capital needs are before we decide what we need to raise. We know for sure we don't have anything, so we need to start getting the capital fund started. But at the end of the day, we also need to have a capital plan. And key to that question, when we talk about the golf course, is the water rights. How do you use those? Where are you using them? Do we have excess or not? And we need to be able to provide for drought protection for the property as well. So that's going to be a big part of the discussion on December 10th. Any other questions for tonight? Yes, sir.
When I came to the annual general meetings over the past few years, whenever somebody stood up and explained the budget, there were two funds. There was an operating fund and there was a capital fund. And out of the operating fund, any surplus went into the capital fund every year. And what I'm hearing now is the capital fund is gone.
You are correct. You are correct. And what happened is that the funds, the funds that were to be set aside for capital were needed for operating. So the capital fund never got funded in many instances, or when it was funded, it had to be drawn away to be used for operating expenses. Not entirely, but substantially. Going back probably about, 3 to 4 years ago, there was a requirement, arguably, reasonable people could debate this, that 6% of the gross revenue of the club was supposed to be set aside for capital needs. Yeah. Well, that requirement could not be achieved. So the whole reason for Mike's presentation tonight to the membership is for everybody truthfully to understand where we stand. And it doesn't matter who's right or wrong about these debates in the past. It's irrelevant. What is important is what do we do in the future? If we want to have a club that's going to be successful, We want to have a club that we enjoy. So you need to be a part of those discussions and those decisions. And I applaud the board and I applaud Mike for saying, you guys need to know what the truth is and how to proceed with that information and that knowledge. And be a part of the solution. Yes.
Is there a question in this survey that basically states, you know, when we get all our numbers together, we anticipate having to raise X number of dollars either by assessment or by increase in dues? And associated with that, a question that surveys the membership as to tolerance for increase. In other words, in the prior years, I've heard a lot of people say, well, they're gonna do this, I'm out of here. So it seems to me that there is a balance level for income production versus member decrease or increase in balancing that issue. In other words, it doesn't seem to me when you set the budget, you're gonna increase it, you know, pick a $5,000 number, it's a number. But we lose more members, then that actually helps us, you know, become to a negative overall change. So is there something in the questions that will give you an indication of the appetite for what people are willing to tolerate?
To a degree. The primary focus of the survey is to determine expectations. But it would be impossible to quantify those dollar-wise in a survey without knowing what the expectations are in the first place. So we first have to understand what the expectations are. It would also be non-productive, I think, to survey 300 people's suggestions about how to fix the capital problem without defining what the capital problem is in the first place. So the purpose of the focus groups is to have you, your wife come in and sit down with Aileen and I and 12 other members and say, this is what the results were. What do you think of those? And what suggestions do you have? And measure tolerance on a face-to-face basis.
Okay. So there is a chance.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, I will say this. You can answer that survey and say, I want kids club, and I want pickleball. And by the way, all this shit's on the survey. And I want pickleball, and I want this, and I want swimming pools, and I want this and all that. But what isn't there is, are you prepared to pay $100 more per month? But there is a question that says, that recognizes the reality of your expectation is that it will increase costs. You need to take that into consideration when you're answering the survey. And that is in the survey. Any other questions? Yes.
Will we have the budget or the projected plan and numbers prior to the survey?
I don't think so. You're going to get the survey, I hope, by the second week in December. We're going to ask you to take until the end of the year to complete it. And then we're going to try to tabulate the results because the next, well, we have a meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee on the 18th, the day after the meeting we have with all of you on the 17th. And then we have another meeting on the 15th of January. So we hope to have the results of the survey by the 15th. The board will get presented the budget, and I don't know what their schedule is for tentatively adopting it. But what I have requested the board and might do is approve a tentative budget. Because our goal is to have a strategic plan in place by April, and based on those expectations, that budget should be revised and changed.
Okay, so the budget will come in with another.
He's going to do whatever he's going to do, and the board's going to do whatever they're going to do. The strategic planning committee is going to come in and say, from our perspective, the membership says X, Y, and Z fund X, Y, and Z. Yes,
So
Don?
Jim, you're not going to take, two Jims, you're not going to take and say, okay, we're going to set the date of June 1st. We're going to have a tentative until June 1st, and then at that point in time, we're then going to implement the new budget, or you're going to come up with a new budget at that time, or how do you proceed doing what you're going to do
I think
based
Mike
on
and-
what you're going to, the information you're going to get?
I think Mike and the board need to develop a budget the way he's done it, using zero-based budgeting.
Right.
And that'll show costs, and it's measured against existing needs. And it's also going to show what the shortfall is, and that's probably going to generate a dues increase, to be honest with you, at a minimum.
Which is what we're expecting.
That's right. But,
Largely what I explained, right? So
Exactly.
what
I
I
mean,
said
this is, based on what you said, this is what we're expecting it to happen. But what I'm questioning is now you've got this information 6 months into the budget.
yep. And then we
Then,
we
we're
think
going to,
that,
then you're going to then go
Reevaluate.
implement another budget for the remaining of the year based on that, or you can wait until the end of the year?
you can make adjustments in the year. The budget, and the beauty of you all ownership that we have in this club is the budget is just a preliminary roadmap that staff to follow based on the expectations of the membership. So as to Sardis's point, as soon as you conclude what that directive is or what that roadmap is, we can, no different than your GPS devices, when you turn the wrong way, it will recalibrate.
Right, okay. So,
If,
and that's
Don-
the case on.
I don't know whether the board is going to include in the budget, we keep coming back to Kids Club. I don't know whether they're going to include in the budget Kids Club or not. That's a board and a Mike decision. I want to know what the members think about that, because that'll be in the strategic plan.
Right.
Is it in or is it out?
Okay. So there's a possibility that you're going to, hypothetically, you could take out the kids. But then, based on what you're going to then come up with, then you could say, okay, we're going to put it back in. Based on.
That's true.
Potentially.
Potentially.
What I will tell you is, first draft, will, like I said, will look very similar to 2018, with the exception of the fact that I will remedy the shortfall through dues. Because again, I told you, this is the last time I'm going to present an assessment to y'all in this room.
Well, and Don, to your point on the broader question, one of the things I expect the committee to deal with and make a recommendation to membership about is the subject of food and beverage. And you'll see that the food and beverage questions on the survey have broken out, have been divided. Do you eat breakfast or lunch here? And separately, do you eat dinner? There's a reason we've separated these questions out. And there's a lot of thought that's gone into these questions, believe me, and why they've been phrased the way they have been phrased. We are trying to test your expectations and your attitudes about this club. Yes, Jennifer?
Getting close.
One of them said, why wait too many hours, the other one said, well, I'm not sure into it, but have we ever reached out to that group of people, you know, and said, okay, now question, and said, what would it take you to run our club, what amenities, what would you want to pay, what would you, I mean, we never really researched, you know, I think
I don't know, as I stand here, I don't know what the past efforts have been to survey non-members about their interest in joining the club. We may come up with a process for that. What I do think is important is we need a strategy to go after target groups in order to secure a lower demographic and improved participation. And at the moment, we don't have a strategy. I mean, tell me, board members, do we have a member strategy? We don't. So the whole point is, no matter what the subject matter is, club governance, water rights, membership, golf course, pro shop, what's our strategy with respect to each of those areas of the club? I don't think we have one. We will have one.
In the survey itself, will there be age groups and will there be age?
You are asked to identify your age range. Age range. Yes.
Is that for you, for Martin?
Well, Dawn, we left enough room for you.
little bit on this generational thing that this lady brought up over there. As you look around, as she said, we're all gray haired, we're all the boomer generation. And I've got 3 kids, and they're in their 40s. And I can't believe how they think. I raised them. But they don't think like I do. And they're a different, almost culture. And what we're trying to do is get this 40-year-old people into a culture that is declining. I don't know how you crack it, because I recently I talked to several people about it, and I talked to a financial advisor the other day. I was playing golf. He said, this worries me. He said, the younger generation, the 40-year-olds coming up now, they're not saving. When they get to retire, they're going to have no money. And our generation, we save. We have retirement plans. We're financially secure, and we can afford to put a certain amount of our money into becoming members of the retirement and enjoy it. But our kids, our 40-year-olds, and the people out there who are trying to get into it, they don't think like that. They don't even come close. And I have to beat up my kids to create an IRA. I said, you're all going to get old one day. And I said, being old and poor sucks. Getting old sucks. But getting old and poor really sucks. And how do we, I think we're trying to get a group of people into this club who just don't think like you and I do. Or most people in this, most people in this group here. They're a different culture.
Well, actually, we've had a couple of comments tonight about who's present tonight. What we haven't talked about is who isn't present here tonight, but our members. And there's quite a number of people in our club who are much younger than you and I. Maybe they think like we do, maybe they don't. But I know for sure that they have a better ability to relate to your kids or to my kids or to my grandkids than I do. And they are an asset to this club, like so many assets we have, but we have not used effectively in this membership effort. I am not going to be able to go to a group of 40-year-olds and convince them to join Hidden Valley Country Club. But there are a group of 45 to 50-year-olds who are current members of this club who, if they are ambassadors, will do so and are prepared to do so. And that's the group that we need to attract. But we also need to target the groups we want to go after. And there are groups in this community, in various business organizations, in various service organizations, who have spendable money, who enjoy the game of golf, and would consider participating in this club.
But like I have 2 sons in the 40s, and they have money saved, but they also have kids that are going
Sure,
to college.
of course.
And otherwise,
Sure, I agree. But I'll give you another example. Dr. Stoker is a member of this club, was a member of this club for about 1.5 years. His son Kyle, his son-in-law Kyle, and daughter Cozy, they are busy as all get out. He's got a very busy practice. She has a very busy dental practice. They got 2 kids. But his son Kyle joined the club. And there are other examples like that. And they see opportunities in that going down the road. So we don't want to foreclose that. We want to go after it. It's out there. Anything else? Okay, thanks a lot, everybody.